Perhaps the most well-known division in contemporary philosophy is that between continental and analytic philosophy. Although a few philosophers attempt to bridge this gap, many more find themselves on one side or the other, or they simply reject being identified as one specific type of philosopher or the other. A lot of times, this distinction is made into a cheap ideological platform for argument. However, there are some fundamental aspects of it that make it interesting. I'll begin the explanation by unpacking the easiest school to explain of the two, analytic philosophy. Analytic philosophy was birthed as a reaction against the German and British idealist movements and emphasizes clarity and logical coherence in philosophical discussions. It is not difficult to understand the temptation to do philosophy in a more easy-to-understand manner, after the domination of the idealist movements in the philosophical world. Anybody who has attempted to read someone like Hegel, for example, can attest to the difficulty and frustration found in making efforts to interpret a comprehensible philosophy out of the massive walls of jargon found in such a thinker's writing. Regarding the logical coherence that marks analytic philosophy, analytics tend to work in strict Aristotelian first and second order logics and their various subtypes. These serve as frameworks for philosophical problems to be quote-unquote translated into. On the other hand, continental philosophy is more difficult to identify in general terms or trends. It is more so identified by certain movements, such as German idealism, existentialism, psychoanalysis, critical theory, structuralism, deconstruction, and their associated philosophers. In general, continental philosophies, like the ones just described, tend to have large and intricate systems in which the theoretical philosophy, that is, metaphysics, epistemology, and logic, is tied in with the practical philosophy, which consists of aesthetics, ethics, political philosophy, and any other philosophy which deals with the quote-unquote concrete. That description leads us to one of the first few major differences between the continental and analytic philosophy. While continental philosophy tends to have systems with the qualities just mentioned, analytic philosophy tends to deal with problems in isolation. For example, in analytic philosophy, you'll find that the areas of logic, philosophy of mind, and ethics are all quite separated and typically don't overlap in content. On the other hand, continental philosophy tends to link these three together in a systematic fashion. Take Hegel, for example, whose dialectical logic gives rise to the subjective experience, which then in turn affects how politics and family life work. Speaking of logic, therein lies another major difference between continental and analytic philosophy. It was mentioned earlier that analytic philosophy tends to strictly adhere to Aristotelian and what might be called neo-Aristotelian logics. However, in continental philosophy, you'll find alternative logics at work, such as the dialectics of Fichte and Hegel and the positive logic of Deleuze. These are pretty lengthy and complicated things to get into, so I encourage you to check out this attic philosophy video on the logic typically used by analytic philosophy, and then on the other hand, this plastic pills video on the logic of Hegel and Deleuze. A good short takeaway on this difference is that in analytic philosophy, there is much discussion framed by true and false, while in continental philosophy, things get a bit more complicated, although the concepts of truth and falsity can still come in handy depending on which continental philosopher or philosophical system is using them. Hopefully this video was helpful in understanding some of the core tenets of and differences between continental and analytic philosophy. We also hope that this has sparked some interest in the subtopics of the two types of philosophy, which most of, if not all of them, will be touched on in more depth on this channel. If you're interested in that, then please subscribe to keep up with our videos. Thank you for watching and have a great day.